Welcome DMs and Dungeon Divers. We're going to talk about spell casting. Are we doing it right or are we doing it wrong? Let's find out. I'm Jimmy Lee and this is Ability Check. Roll it. Now remember, D&D is a game that's put out by Wizards of the Coast. I'm not saying that you do it wrong or one of your players did it wrong. They could have. And you could have. And I know I've messed up a couple of times, and I found out later on. So this is why I'm doing this. I'm diving into actual casting the spell. I'm using the rules from the player's handbook and also the rules from the basic rules. The basic rules that Wizards of the Coast have on their website. There's a link below. Also, DnD Beyond actually has the basic rules on their website too, and there's a link below for that. So let's get into it. So you can go to in your player's handbook or in the basic rules, and you can go to chapter 10. In chapter 10, it talks about how, casting magic or magic in the first place. If you go and look at the spells themselves, I'm not talking about the spell list, the spells themselves. It has a description of the spells, what you need and everything for the spells. Go look at that first. The first line is going to have the spell's name. That's going to basically give you a somewhat quasi thing about what the spell does in the first place. But like I said, it's just a small amount. The second line is going to have the spell level, and it's also going to have the school that the spell comes from. And also on that line, it will tell you whether you can cast it as a ritual or not. If it has quotation marks and ritual in it, you can cast it as a ritual. And we'll talk about that in another video. The third line is talking about the casting time. Casting times for spells are action, reaction, bonus action, and let me see, action, bonus action, reaction, and longer. I'll just call it longer. This means that longer means that you can cast it. It might take 10 minutes to cast or an hour to cast. Basically, when you have something like that, it's not really a combat spell. It's nothing that can be used fast. The next line we're going to talk about is range. Range is a little bit different. All spells have a range. Range of self is still a range. Self means that you cast the spell on yourself. You can't cast it on any other party member or anything like this. It just goes onto yourself. But then it also talks about how you can, how far out the spell that you can cast. Say like on the cantrip Firebolt can go out to 120 feet. The next one we're going to talk about is components. Components is listed as VSM. Verbal somatic material. After the M, whatever the material is that you need for the spell is listed right there. Right? Now, there's an exception to this for a little bit. If the component, the component itself doesn't cost anything and it's not consumed, you can use what they call a spell focus or an arcane focus. For druids, it's going to be a druidic focus. And you can find this in the player's handbook in the equipment section of chapter 5 on page 150 and in the basic rules on page 50. Now, like I said, if it doesn't cost anything, you can use an arcane focus or for casting your spells. If it does cost anything like money or any gold pieces or silver pieces or anything like that, you cannot use the spell focus. You actually have to have the component in your hand. If the component is consumed, like in Fireball, bat guano, probably doesn't cost you much of anything like this because it doesn't have a price on it, but that component is consumed. It will actually tell you that there if it's consumed. If it's not consumed, then yes, you can still use your arcane focus to actually cast the spell. The next we're going to talk about is somatic. Somatic is that you have to make some kind of gesture. All right, it's one hand gesture. Now, if it says verbal somatic material and the material you can use as your arcane focus, you can, or actually even the component itself, you can have it in the same hand that you do the gesture with. All right, so it's like, okay, let's give it the Harry Potter. They have this wand in their hand and they move it around. That is a somatic component. There you go on that one. Now, here's another thing, though, that you have to watch out for in that same thing that they're talking about somatic. If there is no component of material that goes with it, then you have to have a hand free to do the somatic gesture. So that's going to leave out maybe your arcane, no, not arcane, but your Eldritch Knight, because he might have a shield, or your paladin, because he's got a shield. He doesn't have a hand free. Now, Jeremy Crawford says that specific beats general, and there is always an exception. And on this one, there is an exception, but it's with a feat, and the feat is called Warcaster. If you have Warcaster and you have a shield, you can still use that hand to do your gesture or your somatic. The next one we're going to talk about is the verbal. Verbal means you actually have to speak words. Actually, if you hear what it's described is that some people call it a mage voice. If you remember in Gandalf, he speaks these words and it echoes and it goes out and everybody knows what's happening. The wizard's casting a spell, right? The same thing happens in this game too. When you're speaking these words, one, you have to be able to speak the words. All right? If you are silenced in some way and you can't speak the words, the spell does not go off. I'll give you an example of how maybe it will sound, especially like, oh, I got an idea. I have a playing character that I'm playing in a game right now who is a halfling paladin of the Ancient Order. I'm going to use the spell, say he wants to cast the spell Divine Favor. So he holds it up and he's marching in battle. It's a bonus action and he hollers, Holy Yandala, I beseech thee to grant me your divine favor. Then his sword starts to glow, and every time he hits after that, he does another extra 1d4 of radiant damage. He speaks the words, there it is. Pretty cool. So the last line in this is duration. Duration is how long the spell lasts. If it says instantaneous, that means that the spell goes off. Like in Fireball, it says instantaneous. It goes boom. That's it. It's done. It's over with. Then there's another one that says like, okay, Mage Armor, 8 hours. You cast that. The Mage Armor lasts for 8 hours. There's nothing else that's going on there. But there's another one, and this is a catch. It's called Concentration. Say again, Divine Favor. For the Paladin, he casts Divine Favor. He has to concentrate on that spell for 1 minute. That doesn't mean he can't do anything else. It just means that he needs to concentrate on it. Okay, here's the thing about concentration spells. If you get hit and you have a concentration spell up, you must make a Constitution saving throw. And now here's a glitch that I know some people are getting wrong, because I've seen it and I've read where people are doing this. Each time you take damage, you must make the Constitution saving throw. In other words, if in that turn, if you get hit by 2 arrows, you must make 2 Constitution saving throws. If you get hit by 2 arrows and a spell, that's 3 Constitution saving throws. Now, you go against the DC difficulty class, and the difficulty class base is 10. Or it is half the damage that you take from each attack. If it's less than 10, it's still 10. Say you get hit by an arrow and it does 10 points of damage. Half of that is 5. You still have to make the DC 10. To make the Constitution saving throw, you use your Constitution modifier. You add it to you roll the D20 and you add the Constitution modifier. And then that's your road. You must beat DC 10 or DC whatever it is. Now here's an exception too. The Eldritch Knight that's in the player's handbook, one of his best saving throws is Constitution. Go figure. That means that he can also add his proficiency modifier to it. So if his Constitution modifier is a 2 and his proficiency modifier is 3, that's a +5 to the 20 that he rolls. Here's another thing too. Same thing with the Warcaster again. If you have Warcaster, then you can roll 2 dice, 20-sided dice, and take the highest because it gives you advantage on your saving throw. Another thing too is if you already have a spell up that uses your concentration, you can't cast another one. You can cast any other spell, but you cannot cast one that has concentration, because once you cast another spell that uses concentration, the first spell is over with. It's done. Now, the last part is the spell itself, the meat of the spell. If you look down there, it's the description of the spell. It tells you if you need to make an attack, a spell attack. It tells you if the opponent needs to make a saving throw, and it tells you what type of saving throw against your DC, how much damage it does. If they make the saving throw, do they take half damage or no damage? Even how to upspell the spell, like it does more damage if you go from 2nd level to 3rd level, cast it in a 3rd level slot. But it's all there. Remember, one thing, how to cast the spell, what it actually does is written down in the description. Know your spells. So now on page 204 in the Player's Handbook, and on page 84 in the basic rules, there's a thing called target, or targeting. It's talking about the spells, how they go off, how you can do it. First thing that we're going to talk about is that you need a clear path to the target. I like to call it line of sight. If you can see it, you can hit it. The whole thing about one is like for raise and other things, that if you need to make and then this is in the spell description, whether you need to make a spell attack or the other opponent needs to make a saving throw. Now, here's one. If you need to make a spell attack, you roll a 20-sided dice and you add your spell modifier, which is actually going to be whether it's your intelligence, wisdom, or charisma. You add that to it. Then you also add your proficiency bonus to it too, and it goes against your opponent's AC armor class. Now, because you're making a spell attack, also half cover, 3/4 cover, and full cover do apply. Full cover because you can't see the target, you can't hit the target. Half cover gives it a +2 to its AC, and 3/4 cover gives it a +5 to its AC. Now, like again, as long as they're within range, you can hit them. There's a possibility to hit them, but there's also an exception on this one. There's the feat called Spell Sniper. Spell Sniper extends the range of a spell like this. And if you're making actually any spell that actually makes a spell attack, it will extend the range double. So like Ray of Frost, from 60 it goes to 120. Firebolt that goes 120 now goes to 240. But you still need to make a spell attack. Also, it negates half cover and 3/4 cover, but it does not negate full cover. Now we're going to talk about area of effect spells. Area effect spells usually say you need to make it. The opponent needs to make a saving throw. It's either Dex, Con, whatever it needs to make. I said usual because sometimes even regular attacks you need to make a saving throw for a secondary effect. But on this one right here, it's usually whether you're going to take half damage or no damage. If it says that you need to make a saving throw, then it's usually an area effect, but it's not quite always that way. Area effect spells usually have what they call a point of origin, and I'll explain this as we go along. And the point of origin is somewhere in the shape of the spell. The spell has cone, a cube, cylinder, line, and sphere. All right, I think I got it. Yeah, I got them all there. All right. Now, a cone, if you're casting a cone spell, it tells you how the distance that the spell can go. So, say like Burning Hands is 15 feet. Now, the point of origin is from you out. Okay, so that point of origin is right there in front of you, so it's out. It goes out to 15 feet. At the end of that cone, it's 15 feet across too. So, also like Cone of Cold. I think it goes out 60 feet. At the end of that cone, it's 60 feet across. But remember, the point of origin is you right there. The next one is cube. Now, the point of origin for a cube can be anywhere along the cube. It could be the height, the width, the length, whatever, you know, it's there. Wherever you put the point of origin, it's your choice. From there, it goes out. The next one is a cylinder. A cylinder actually is, say, like Moonbeam is a cylinder. It has a 5-foot radius. You cast it wherever it is, you cast it. You have to see the origin of, you know, your point of origin where you're going to cast it. You can go send it out to a certain amount, to a certain distance that says in the spell how far out you can cast it. Wherever you cast it, the point of origin, you need to be able to see where it goes. In other words, you can't cast it into darkness if you can't see it. You can't cast it on the other side of a wall if you cannot see where it's going. It has a point of origin. You need to be able to see where the point of origin is going to be. From the point of origin, it has a 5-foot radius for Moonbeam, so that means 10 feet across, and it goes up high. So it's a cylinder. It goes up. The next one is a line such as, lightning bolt. The point of origin is you outward. Okay, that's not necessarily always true for a lot of the lines, but for this spell, it is. You are the point of origin, and it goes straight out from you. Because you're the point of origin, you can cast it straight out, whatever direction you're wanting to cast it. You don't have to see the end results because the point of origin is where you're at. Right? The next one is we're going to talk about sphere. Sphere like not lightning bolt, fireball. Fireball, you throw it out you cast fireball and it goes out to a certain distance. You have a point of origin. From that point of origin, it has a 20-foot radius. Darkness does the same thing. All right, you can cast it however far it says in the spell description. Also, it says, you know, range up there, how far you can cast it out, and then in the spell description it tells you what it does from there. So you cast fireball. It has a 20-foot radius, so that's 40 feet across. Everybody in there must make a saving throw. I think it goes against, it goes against Dex. Your DC, now your DC for these spells is 8 plus your spell casting modifier, and if it's going to be a fireball, it's usually intelligence. So you add that plus your proficiency bonus. So you add that together, and that's your DC difficulty class. If they cast, so they have to make a dexterity saving throw, and they have to be able to beat your DC. If they fail your DC in fireball, of course, they take half damage. Other spells, there's some spells, if they make the DC, they take no damage. It depends on what's going on. It's in the spell description. Please know your spells. Right. So there you go. This is what can really screw up a party. So we really need to understand the dynamics of how the spells are cast. And this is what I did here, and I gave it all to you. And hopefully this can help you. And if it did, leave a comment below. Hit that subscribe button and hit that like so you don't miss anything I'm going to bring to you. And remember, I'm Jimmy Lee, and this is Ability Check. Y'all come back now, you hear? Roll it.